Today we're taking a look at what could easily be considered the greatest chess game ever played. Is it the most beautiful game ever played? Maybe not. Is it the most famous? Well, it's right up there, though I do think Morphy's opera game might have it beat, but it certainly had a pretty airtight claim to that title at the time it was played. Is it the most accurate? Definitely not. There are some errors made by both sides, though not as many as was once thought, and we're going to get into that. But when you consider the beauty, the fame, and the accuracy of this game all at the same time, there is a compelling case to be made that this game is the greatest of them all. But I'll let you decide. If you've never seen it, you're in for a real treat. It's absolutely nuts. The losing side doesn't lose a single piece, while the winner sacrifices almost his entire army, including his queen, in order to force checkmate. It was played in 1851 between Adolph Anderssen, who was widely regarded as the world's leading chess player during that time, and Lionel Kieseritzky, one of the top French masters of the day. It took place during a tournament, although it was not part of the tournament, being a casual game. Anderssen has the white pieces, and he opens this epic masterpiece with e4. Kieseritzky responds e5, after which we have f4, the king's gambit. Gotta love the 19th century. Opening theory was still in its infancy, nobody really knew what they were doing, not compared to nowadays anyway, so opening gambits were all the rage because they worked. And despite the fact that the engine as well as 100 years of opening theory now tells us that this move f4 is objectively just kinda weak, it can still be very dangerous if your opponent doesn't know how to deal with it. Kieseritzky plays e takes f4, universally considered to be the strongest reply, grabbing an extra pawn at the cost of displacing his strong central e-pawn, which is now on the inferior f4 square. Most popular for white here is knight to f3, guarding the h4 square, but Anderssen goes for the provocative alternative, bishop to c4, allowing queen to h4 with check, now played by Kieseritzky. White, of course, cannot block with g3, or else f takes g3 is going to be a big problem, so he's got to move his king. It goes to f1, after which only three things are certain: death, taxes, and the fact that Anderssen will not be castling for the remainder of this game. So why would white allow such a thing? Well, now black's queen is on a less than ideal square, allowing white to play knight to f3 with tempo on the next move. So it's all about rapid piece development here for white, and central control. Next we have a move that has never been super popular, b5, known as the Briar Gambit. So what does this accomplish besides dropping a pawn to bishop takes b5, now played by Anderssen? Well, not a lot. Not nearly enough anyway. Okay, it does distract the bishop from its view of f7, that can be a sensitive square. It opens the b7 square for the development of black's light squared bishop, but that's about all I got. Probably not a move you'd ever want to play, but if you're a fan of the Briar Gambit, feel free to go ahead and try to change my mind. Anyway, we have knight to f6, knight to f3, attacking the queen, it goes to h6, keeping some defense of the f-pawn, which after Anderssen's next move, d3, is under fire by the bishop on c1. Now it's interesting that Anderssen just gave up on playing the move d4 in one go. Better would have been knight to c3, defending e4, planning d4 next. The engine even likes playing d4 right away, sacrificing the e-pawn in order to open up that file to the black king. But okay, d3 is not bad. But black's next move, knight to h5, kinda is. Despite the fact that it does come with the threat of knight to g3 check, forking king and rook, exploiting the pin on white's h-pawn, the best way for white to answer that, not played by Anderssen, is rook to g1, planning g4, exploiting the pin on black's f-pawn, which will not be free to capture en passant on g3, lest black lose his queen. But even if black were to address that with something like g5, then g4 is still good, since after f takes g3 and h takes g3, now white's got a way to activate his rook via the h file, after defending g3 of course with something like king to g2, so white is the preferred side here. What's played in the game after knight to h5 is knight to h4, answering the threat of knight to g3, since here black's knight could just be captured, while also looking to jump into f5 with tempo on the black queen. Kieseritzky responds queen to g5, attacking the knight as well as the bishop on b5, and so forcing white to play knight to f5, at which point we have a slight inaccuracy with the move c6, which doesn't seem to accomplish anything besides help white get his bishop out of the view of the black queen, with his strongest response, bishop to a4, eliminating any possibility of queen takes b5 after black kicks the knight out of f5 with the move g6, which incidentally, black should have played right away, to which white would have to respond h4, counterattacking black's queen, leading to some complications that we're not going to delve into. Suffice to say, it seems to favor black a bit. What's played in the game is the inaccurate g4, counterattacking the knight on h5, giving black the chance to gain a big advantage now with the move g6. This wasn't played in the game, but black should really be welcoming the capture of his knight on h5, since after he takes the knight on f5, white's bishop is still under attack, and if it were to move, which isn't even best, the engine is giving rook to g1 followed by queen to f3, just sacrificing the bishop. But let's say bishop to c4 is played. Here white is just losing after f takes e4, d takes e4, and d5. When all of a sudden, white's king is in big trouble, with bishop to h3 check threatened, followed by queen to g2, bishop to c5 is on the cards as well. So white has no way to answer these threats to his king without losing his bishop on c4. Now if he had played bishop to a4 instead, that wouldn't help, because then bishop to a6 check would get him into big trouble. So a lost opportunity here by black, but let's take a look at what was played in the game. Kieseritzky decides that he doesn't like the idea of g takes h5, and so drops his knight back to f6, maybe thinking that after Anderssen retreats his attacked bishop, he'll be able to pick up the now twice attacked pawn on g4. And that would give black a borderline winning position. If bishop to a4, for example, the engine is recommending g6, kicking the knight out of f5, followed by knight takes g4 or queen takes g4, depending on how white responds. However, retreating the bishop from b5 is not white's best move in this position. Pause the video if you'd like to determine what is. If you said h4, that's a good guess, but what's best is to sacrifice the bishop with the move Anderssen plays next, rook to g1. A sacrifice which should not be accepted. Best for black here is to play h5. And if you don't already know why, you're going to see in just a moment. Kieseritzky goes right ahead and takes that bishop though with c takes b5, allowing white a powerful winning attack which Anderssen executes without giving Kieseritzky any opportunity to save himself. A fact which has not always been appreciated. And we're going to be taking a look at a move that was once criticized as throwing away the win, but which recently has been vindicated by the latest version of Stockfish. Anderssen begins this stunning sequence by playing h4, attacking the black queen, which can only go to g6. Next is h5, attacking the queen again, a move that wouldn't have been possible if black had played h5 himself, like he should have, instead of capturing the bishop on b5. This forces the black queen back to g5, but now comes queen to f3, and with it, the threat of bishop takes f4, trapping black's queen. Something must be done. Kieseritzky plays knight to g8, since that's the only good way to give his queen some squares. We do have bishop takes f4, the queen goes to f6, eyeing the undefended pawn on b2. The alternative queen to d8 wouldn't have been any better, since all of black's pieces would be back on their original squares, giving white a ridiculous lead in development, for which black's 2 pawns worth of extra material will not even come close to compensating him. Next is knight to c3, bishop to c5, attacking the rook on g1, and setting the stage for a stunning sacrificial sequence that is among the most legendary ever played. And before it's finished, white will have given up both of his rooks and his queen in addition to his sacrificed bishop, while black will still have all of his pieces. But you know what black won't have? A king that is not in checkmate. So let's have a look at this immortal combination. It begins with knight to d5, attacking the queen, which captures the pawn on b2, leaving both of white's rooks under attack. Now objectively strongest for white is the move rook to e1, saying please, take my rook on g1, because if you do, now your bishop is no longer defending d6, and I've got knight to d6 check. Now this was not played in the game, but black is just completely toast here, with Stockfish giving a checkmate by force in 10 moves. If king to d8, then there's knight takes f7 check, forking king and rook, if nothing else. Of course there is something else, which is checkmate in 7 with the move e5. And you're going to see exactly what this move e5 does for white in the game. King to f8 fails to bishop to e5, threatening both bishop takes queen and checkmate on f7. So this variation would have been the most decisive for white. Anderssen, in the game, goes for something much more flashy with the absolutely insane-looking bishop to d6, doing nothing about the attack on either of his rooks. Anderssen is much more interested in eliminating black's defender of the dark squares, particularly the d6 square. And for a long time, it was thought that this move bishop to d6 was a blunder. As recently as 5 years ago, I've seen computer-assisted analysis claiming that queen takes a1 check, king to e2, and queen to b2 would have been a good way for black to hold the draw. This wasn't played in the game, but it leads to incredible complications that even the strongest engines haven't been able to properly evaluate until fairly recently, when the latest versions of Stockfish have demonstrated that black is still totally losing. So what I'm going to do is just quickly show you the key winning move that Stockfish discovered. In this position, black is threatening to meet bishop takes c5 with queen takes c2 check, picking up white's bishop with a drawn position. So what's long been considered best is king to d2, defending c2, bishop takes rook on g1, e5, blocking the black queen's defense of g7 and so threatening knight takes g7 check, forcing the king to d8, after which bishop to c7 would be checkmate. Hence the move bishop to a6, giving the king a square on c8. Now here, it was previously thought that the best white has is something like knight to c7 with check, going after the rook on a8, which does lead to a draw, but after 45 seconds of analysis on my hardware, Stockfish 17 switches its evaluation from approximate equality to white is winning after the move bishop to b4. That's how long it takes for it to realize that the threat of knight to d6 check is severe enough to give white the win. So I'm going to stop there, but stick around after the game because I'm going to let the engine play the game out from here just so you can see how it would end with best play from both sides. Let's get back to the game though, where after bishop to d6, Kieseritzky plays bishop takes rook on g1, to which Anderssen responds e5, setting up the checkmate threat that we saw in the variation we just looked at, with knight takes g7 check, king to d8, and bishop to c7 checkmate. So black's got to deal with that, but not before capturing the free rook on a1 with check. Anderssen plays king to e2, but here, because bishop takes g1 and e5 were played prior to taking the rook with the queen, black has no time to throw in the move queen to b2 attacking c2. He needs to deal with the imminent threat of checkmate. Now the best way to do that, not played in the game, is with the move bishop to a6, which would still lose to knight to c7 check with that discovered attack on the a8 rook and a heavy aroma of checkmate still in the air, but at least it answers the threat of knight takes g7 check, king to d8, and bishop to c7 check, since the king now has the c8 square available as the result of the move bishop to a6. In the game, however, Kieseritzky plays a move that looks like it answers the threat of checkmate, knight to a6, covering the c7 square with the knight, so that after Anderssen's knight takes g7 check and king to d8, there is no bishop c7 checkmate. There is, however, a checkmate in 2 moves available to white, which Anderssen does now execute. Pause the video and see if you can spot it. The spectacular crowning jewel of this epic masterpiece is a sacrifice of the queen on f6 with check. Black's only got 2 legal moves. If knight to e7, then queen takes knight is checkmate, and after knight takes f6, Anderssen has the gorgeous bishop to e7 checkmate. How insane is that? Black has not lost a single piece while white is down a queen, both rooks, and a bishop. That's 22 pawns worth of material. 21 pawns if you want to count white's extra pawn, but that's just crazy. I don't recall ever seeing any game where the winning side had that kind of material deficit, although I'm sure there must be some, and if you know of any, definitely feel free to bring them to my attention in the comments. But that's all I have to say about that. Don't go anywhere though, because now it's time for some engine-on-engine action as promised. Starting in this position from that alternative variation we looked at, which was previously thought to be drawn for black, but which Stockfish will now demonstrate is in fact winning for white, beginning with this move bishop to b4, preparing knight to d6 check. So I'm not going to comment on this, but go ahead, sit back, enjoy the music, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, hit that like button if you liked anything about this video or anything else, as you watch Stockfish with the white pieces defeat Stockfish with black.